which is probably good this time of night. Call the meeting to order. Sorry, I was speaking for myself. At this point, I suspect our new city councillors, Towner and Marsden, are wondering what they got themselves into.
Good to go.
Madam City Clerk, oh, still Keeners. Madam City Clerk.
Your Worship, I just want to note that we do have 2 additional on-table items this evening, one related to council member appointments to 2015 committees, and the second is related to citizen appointments to 2015 statutory committees. First item are minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, December 8th. The recommendation is that council approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 are minutes of the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee meeting held September 24th. The recommendation is that council receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 are minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting held November 19th, 2014. The recommendation is that council receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving on to the items coming out of this evening's public hearing. The first item, item 4, City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4511, related to the properties at 1746 and 1750 Brunette Avenue. The recommendation is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to the bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5, City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4473, 2014, relating to the property at 1875 Pipeline Road. The recommendation is that council give second and third readings to the bylaw.
Moved by Councillor moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Wilson.
Just had a couple questions here. Back when the residential properties above the Bedrock location were rezoned in 1991, it was my understanding that staff did not support that rezoning because it was an industrial area. Is that correct?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. We wanted to check on the history of the subdivisions that created the lots in the area, and that's what we found in our research. That at the time, I think, as I alluded to in my comments earlier, the public hearing, the predominant zoning in that area was A3. It was proposed to go from A3 to the RS2. It was not supported by staff at the time, but that was approved, and the lots were then subdivided, and that's what resulted in that RS2 pocket zoning there.
Right. There was also some comments made in the public hearing about how there's no industrial operations other than Bedrock on the east side of Pipeline, but I've been up there a number of times and I've seen settling ponds, I've seen storage facilities, I've seen scale, so those would be considered industrial operations, I'm assuming?
Mr. McIntyre.
Through the chair, yeah, that's some interesting observations. And that's one thing, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to look into that. There's that schedule that's attached to the staff report that I was looking tonight at the date of that, and it was 2002 as part of the Northwest Coquitlam Area Plan that makes that distinction between lands to the west of Pipeline Road and lands to the east of Pipeline Road. So before my time here, but I suspect that might have been sort of after much of those industrial operations that you've identified along that corridor on the right, on the east side of Pipeline Road were established, right. And sort of grandparented operations, I guess.
And then there was also a comment about this property not being legal since 1986, and can you comment on that? Because that wasn't my understanding. It's a little bit not as black and white.
Well, you weren't here, and neither were we, but Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. This one's it's a little more difficult to give a definitive answer. It does go back in time. My sense of, in discussing it with other staff, particularly legal services staff, who look more closely into this and are checking of the files, and speaking with the applicant as well, I think it's fair to say there's a variety of views on this. There's differing interpretations of what was allowed and what was permitted and what could have been received a business license at different points in time. Clearly now today, the comments made that this type of operation would not be consistent with the A3 zoning, but somehow it was established and has been operating there. And it's not common, but sometimes that does happen, where we have non-complying uses, businesses operating in the city, and you have to go back sort of after the fact and deal with it through the zoning. And that's what the approach was taken here, is recognize there was an existing established business, but it did have impacts. It did have effects on the neighboring residents. And was there a way, a means of dealing with those impacts in formalizing the zoning now? That's what's being proposed.
And so if we follow staff's recommendation tonight, we would wait until the applicant has done all of the work before passing fourth reading. Is that correct?
Your Worship, if I could just maybe refer that to Michael. He's the file manager, and he's more up on the details of what would happen at fourth if council was to support second and third readings tonight.
Mr. Dhaliwal.
Through your worship, that is correct. The applicant would apply for a building permit, and we'd begin reviewing the permits required for the building, the berm, the concrete wall. He'd be submitting in the restrictive covenant for review by legal services as well as planning staff to address all the restrictions that are going to be placed on the site as part of this rezoning before fourth and final, and submit the good neighbor agreement for review by staff as well.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Following on that, this on the registered covenant that will be added, something that the applicant, Mr. Allard, said he was willing to do this December 10th letter to the city, and also that we talked about tonight. Will council get to see the exact wording of this covenant, stipulating all of these promises about no further encroachment, about remediation of various issues we talked about tonight? Will we get to see that at fourth reading?
Through your worship, yes, they will be attached to the final report. Should this bylaw receive second and third reading, those reports would be attached with the fourth and final reading report.
But I think it's going to be important to take a look at that, because interestingly, a lot of these potential problems, actually, with the water perhaps contaminating nearby streams of the river, that were mentioned not just by the neighbors but by some of the Burke Mountain naturalists and stream keepers as well. These are issues that I actually have not heard in my years of chairing the Coquitlam River Aggregate Committee, and in the short time that I spent sitting on the Coquitlam River Watershed Roundtable Core Committee. I think I got it right. Councillor Wilson's on there now. I shortened it to CRICOR or something like that. And those specific concerns about the potential impact of that of the operation on the river weren't raised in either of those settings. So I have to presume that on those, specifically on the contamination of water, that's more of a potential that it might happen, that it hasn't really happened yet, which is good. And certainly the testing the city has done in the last couple of years on the Coquitlam River doesn't indicate that it's happening there either. So if we can get good, solid, firm language that there's even going to be more protections taking place than are already in place, I think that's even better. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to make a comment on this for some of the I guess, some of the residents who are negatively impacted by this, and why I want to move this on and look very closely at the restrictive covenant that will be in place. As is quite apparent, the vast majority of us here on council have just been here for 3 years or less. Obviously, we've inherited a problem that's been around for quite a long time. Should it have been allowed to exist? Was it totally illegal, quasi-illegal, in a gray zone or something like that? I don't know. We're trying to deal with this the best way we can now to do two things: to reduce the negative impacts on the residents that are in the area, to ensure that the environment is continue to be protected, and to help what's obviously a very productive company get some security. In moving ahead with this text amendment to allow this company to more firmly put down roots, we are also at the same time moving to regulate it more closely with things like this restrictive covenant. So it's kind of like the argument you hear with some other things that are completely unregulated. There's lots of adverse effects. When we regulate things more properly, the effects can be reduced. The adverse effects can be reduced. So, and I'm going to try my best to make this a win-win, and I think we're on the right road to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Well, my concern was the river, but as I asked staff, we've been monitoring the river for, I would say, 10 years for sure, close to that.
Close.
And if anything showed up, we wouldn't really notice a difference because this has been going on all that time. So what we would notice, I guess, if there was some dastardly little bug that came from some other neighborhood that got into our river, but even if it did, we would know about it and deal with it because it's been going on for so long. When this business did open, they did have their own rocks. They had lots of rock. And what happened is, I guess they ran out of the rock that they could take out of the ground, and then they started importing rocks. And that's where, somewhere along the line, the problem became really bad. The problem I'm having with this is the dust. And I would hope, and I'm not quite sure what's going to show up in this restrictive covenant with respect to the dust. And I don't know that we've got it nailed down right. One of the things that we have got nailed down right, of course, is the setback from the river. But I think there's got to be something more that we can do for the dust abatement, because that's not healthy. So is there something in there with the dust? Whoever wants to answer.
Your Worship, as I mentioned before, Metro Vancouver is in charge of our air quality, and there's nothing to prevent us from looking at those standards, see how they are applicable, and incorporate the appropriate values in the potential permit that we are to issue.
As long as I'm assured that you're going to be doing that.
Oh,
Thank
definitely.
You.
Councillor Zerillo.
Question for staff. Is there a precedent set where this council has changed a zoning bylaw to accommodate a single business?
About 2 weeks ago, when we did that for a union office, I think.
Oh, was that a temporary use?
It was a zoning.
Okay.
That was a text amendment.
Did an accountant?
It's not often we do it, but it happens.
Schoolhouse?
Mr. McIntyre.
To the chair, that's correct. It's not a customary thing we want to be doing, but on occasion it does happen. As I said, when a use or a business is identified that's non-compliant, you go back and deal with it after the fact.
Never so long.
Okay. Well, I have to say I really like this type of business. I like the idea of adding value to Canadian products and keeping jobs in the community, and also there's many partners that work with this company that are jobs. The piece that I'm struggling with is this is operating outside of the zoning, and it doesn't match the OCP zoning. So, I mean, that's what I'm struggling with. I'm struggling with, I think I said it a few council meetings ago, is that these OCPs and these bylaws are contracts that we've made with our community, and it's hard to walk away from that contract, and I really am going to struggle with this one. I'll listen to what others have to say. But
And I'm in the same boat. When I went to visit these neighbors 3 years ago, I think, that particular day, I gather they explained it wasn't a particularly noisy day. It was a noisy enough day. Their quiet little stretch of the river wasn't quiet at all. And it was with an industrial application that clearly wasn't attached to the mine. It wasn't there because of the mine. It was there because it was for whatever reason it came to be there. And it came to be there a long time ago. It came not my predecessor, not my predecessor's predecessor, but the mayor before that, and the council in the 80s. Like, this is 1986, Expo 86. That was a long time ago when this business started. And as Councillor Reid said, it was undoubtedly started with legitimate local product, and it evolved. We would never have made we wouldn't make the decision today if a business came and said, we want to set up, that's where we want to set up a manufacturing plant up at the north end of the pipeline road on a former gravel pit. We would say, no, why don't you set it up at United Boulevard? You can bring your product in by river. There's all kinds of things you can do. We wouldn't put it there. Zoning shouldn't be determined by mistakes or by any other influences. Zoning should be determined by what's the best land use for a particular site and what's the best place to put office buildings or whatever. And we all too often make zoning decisions because of the historical realities of something. And in this case, I think that's how we got to where we are today with the residents there say there's no industrial on that side of the street. I actually clarified that with them because I saw the same thing that Councillor Wilson saw, is services that are ancillary to industrial. I mean, there's heavy industry on the west side of pipeline, and there's the services that are ancillary to that heavy industry on the east side of pipeline, the water reclamation or the siltation ponds and the scales and the office building and such. But I don't distinguish that much between them because that's where the gravel pits are, because that's where the gravel is. That's not where the stone is for this operation. And so, we're trucking it all the way up through our main street, through our downtown, and then all the way up the river to be cut and then trucked all the way back to their customers. And so I'm struggling with this one. There's some jobs I want to protect. There's a local business that's thriving. I don't know that anyone set out originally to have a non-conforming business, but we have a non-conforming business, and we ought not to be making decisions based on history as much. But I, like Councillor Zarillo, will listen to everyone else. Oh, come on, there's no one else that's going to speak.
You've got all the good knowledge.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope. The motion on the floor, it's second, third, and fourth, I think. Second and third reading, and we'll then have something come back. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Zarillo and myself are opposed, but the motion carries.
Item 6 is City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4520, 2014, related to the property at 755 Miller Avenue. The recommendation is that Council gives second, third, and fourth and final readings to the zoning bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7, City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4510, 2014, for 257 Hart Street, 261 Hart Street, and 705 Gauthier Avenue. The recommendation is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to the bylaw.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8, Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4517-2014 and City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4518-2014 for 563 to 609 Cottonwood Avenue and 612 and 614 Vanessa Court. Recommendation 1 is that council give second, third, fourth, and final readings to Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4517.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Wilson.
I really like what the developer is proposing to do about parking. I think we've all been struggling about parking issues, and for me that makes a big difference on this. That the extra parking spots will be turned over to the Strata Council after a year, because too many times those parking spots are sitting empty and people are parking on the street. So I had a few reservations about this, and a lot of them were kind of around parking. And this helps a lot, I think, with this project. So I appreciate the effort that they've made, and I think that hopefully can be a model for other developments in these areas where we have parking issues.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo.
I really like this project. I really like the look of it. I think it's wonderful to have the frontages the way they are. I just think it's a beautiful project. I have some questions for staff. Dog parks. I'm going to talk a little bit about amenities for the project. Dog parks. Are there dog parks around this project?
Off leash.
No, it doesn't have to be off leash. Well, I guess it does if it's a dog park, yeah.
There are no parks around this project. We're getting there, though.
Yes, Your Worship. Just to answer the question, we've got Cottonwood Park, not far from this site. There's also Coquitlam Park. There's a number of schools in the area. Those are the two prime parks. They're not. They're not dog off leash. No, they're not.
Okay.
But certainly something we would look at.
What would we have timing? What would be timing? Your best guesstimate on a dog park off leash?
Much of the work that we'll be doing around the amenities in this neighborhood will come through the neighborhood plan, the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan, which is underway at the moment. So we'll be doing a whole review of services and assets, including park needs in the area as part of that review, and dog off leash areas would be part of that review.
Okay. So, sorry, I cut you off on the schools because that was one of my questions. What school, and is there adequate space in the school?
Just Mountain View and...
Because they're rebuilding Banting, which would also be...
Yeah, it would be the secondary, but Mountain View is really close.
Mountain View, Miller Park, Roy Stibbs are the three, and two of them have space, I think. Mr. Johansson.
Yes, Your Worship, through the Councillor Zerillo. Your question was, is there adequate school space?
Well, what are the schools, and are they, I guess I want to know if they're walkable, like, is there adequate space? Like, what's the designated school for this area? Can't be all three.
The closest one to my knowledge is Mountain View on Robinson, and there's also the Banting complex north of Como Lake. With the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan, we also have School District 43 representatives on the public advisory group, so we'll be working with them and consulting with them about future capacity as the area grows. They do have a lot of land assets in the area, so I think they do have the long-term ability to house additional school children.
Thank you. My other question was about grocery stores. When will there be a walkable or close grocery store to this project?
The one on Cottonwood gone?
There's a little, that little convenience store there? I'm talking about like a grocery store that's supermarket.
Through the chair, I noticed when I was out there today having a look at the property, there is a grocery store down at a small one, mind you, on Cottonwood.
Yeah, I've been in there.
At the west end there. There's not a whole lot left in the Coquitlam Plaza right now, but the good news is the Boza project, which also the anchor of that is going to be a new enlarged modern Safeway store at the corner of Como Lake and Clark.
But what's the timing on it?
2 years.
It's a really deep hole right now.
It's going through building permit review.
Building permit review.
Then my other one was about park and ride. We showed the circle on the TDS, but do we know where there's park and ride? Because these streets are very close, and if there is no park and ride, we know we're going to get people parking on the street.
The park and ride issue is still being worked on, but Mr. McIntyre is in charge of it.
Yeah, no, sorry, I don't have much of a solid answer on that one. I know at the break, Raul was just mentioning to me in his former capacity in the planning department, looking at the transit integration with the Coquitlam SkyTrain station. There was a lot of work being done on that, providing better transit access to that station, but not so much on a destination parking at this point.
Do we have any crystal ball on our side about where people are going to park if this opens in?
Through the chair, a fair question. I think the city would be, and perhaps Joseph can comment on this, as in the city center here, we're looking now at our on-street parking and other parking opportunities and how that needs to be managed with the opening of the SkyTrain system. So I imagine that same analysis would be done for the Coquitlam Lougheed corridor as well.
Amy?
I would trust that a program and plan would be in place by 2016 when the new transit service is available.
And then my other note was just about the full road, or there was a note, there was something here about that we're only going to have a portion of the road width. I'm not sure where but I understand that we don't necessarily have the road widths that we need, and I just want to make sure that there is adequate road width for fire vehicles and for full movement around.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Zerillo. For the north-south Vanessa Court, the interim condition is 6.3 meter wide pavement, which is adequate for two-way travel, and 6 meters is required for fire department.
Yeah.
And the Vanessa Lane, and that's going to be the ultimate cross-section for that north-south road is 10.5 meters, which allows for parking on both sides of the street, and of course two-way traffic. The Vanessa Lane is intended to be at its ultimate with a narrow street, which allows two-way traffic and on-street parking on one side of the street.
That's what you're saying. Okay, and then my other concern, all my concerns have to do with city infrastructure, none of it around the development or the developer, but this is about the OCP amendment number 1, so that's why I'm asking. When I was door knocking along Cottonwood, and I don't know the name of the street because it doesn't say on the map, but there is already a dogleg street that comes onto Cottonwood. It's a bus route, and it's quite dangerous just because of the fact that it's a dogleg. I heard a lot of feedback about it when I was out knocking on doors. It's to the east side of Cottonwood, past, like, before Fairview, I believe. And so I'm a little bit concerned about this dogleg that we're creating also in Vanessa Court. If we already have a history of unsafe.
Vanessa Court is a dogleg now.
Is it Adler Avenue?
Yeah,
on the south
no,
side?
there's one a little bit farther east.
Florence.
Is that the name of it?
Could be Florence is up there.
You know which one I mean, though, right? Right at the corner of. So is there any way, if we waited, that this would ever be a straight road, or is it always going to have this unfortunate curve in it?
Through the chair, and I think the comments I was making earlier in referencing that attachment 3 in the report, which pulled back and you can see a little bit more of the neighborhood, and really the road system in this neighborhood is incomplete. As I explained before, very lengthy east-west blocks and very few north-south connections. And I think if you look at it, you can see there's been attempts over time to get some north-south roads, but it's all what we call discontinuous. There's a segment here, there's a missing link, then there's another segment over there. And I think what's been done over the decades is trying to make the best of that and make those connections. And sometimes you have those dog-leg connections going from one alignment to another.
Yeah.
In this instance here, as Carl pointed out with the TDS, Transformative Development Strategy, there was thought, there was analysis given to that to try to seize those opportunities to get those road connections through development applications. Otherwise, you're into laying down a road network plan, a grid, on top of people's properties, and you're into purchase and expropriation, which just isn't on. So you seize the opportunity through the development application process. So sometimes you don't always get the best alignment, but you are getting those north-south linkages. And again, as Joseph mentioned in his earlier comments, the Strategic Transportation Plan has noted that for this area. And so when we get into the details of the neighborhood planning, we'll get into that, closer focus on how we can extend and connect that road network, so it becomes more regular and less discontinuous.
And I can appreciate that you can't just start drawing up, down, left, right, and left. So thank you for that. So I'm just looking at number 1, that we're looking for council to give second, third, and fourth final to the citywide official community plan. But what we've talked about today is really that we're working off the TDS, not the OCP. So I'm sorry to say it has everything to do with the fact that a couple of the questions that I answered today, we said we're waiting for the neighborhood plan, we're waiting for the neighborhood plan, and we need to see the neighborhood plan. And I really think this is a wonderful development. But it's just the citywide official community plan. I just don't think that we should be rezoning something that we're not even working off. We've said we've been working off the TDS, and I'd like to see the neighborhood plan come before the development. But I will thank Polygon for this, because it is beautiful.
If I could just make a comment on that. Some time ago, Council did ask us to develop the TDS to guide interim developments, noting that the neighborhood plan wasn't there. And in order to implement this particular development, the OCP needs to be changed. But Council very strategically decided that they would use the TDS to guide development in the interim, and these developers have proceeded in good faith on that basis, and so it would be unfair to hold them to a different standard at this point.
Councillor Hodge.
I like the development. I've sort of expressed concerns in the past about going 5-story wood, but I think on this case, I like the look of the development. I think it's in a good location. My big concern has been around Vanessa Court and the proximity of this development to Vanessa Court. Vanessa Court, it's a unique little neighborhood within this community here. And I can understand why the residents want to preserve what they have there. And this is a neighborhood that, while all of this development has been going on for 5 years and all in around in Coquitlam, this one little street, because of the the way it's been laid out, and because of the history of how that street came to be, it's been sort of insulated from all the rest of this development. And now suddenly they're going to face the same challenges in the development that many of the residents in Coquitlam have been facing for many years. So I think it's hitting home with the residents in that neighborhood, and so I can certainly appreciate how they're feeling the change that's suddenly happening, and it's happening right at the end of their street. And some of the emails that we've received and the letters that we've received talk about traffic and more traffic in their neighborhood, and yet this is a development that's being built near a SkyTrain station with the idea that people who are going to live here aren't going to have cars. And I hope that's the case, because our whole OCP, our whole development and neighborhood plan is being based on the fact that we're trying to build a transit-oriented community. And so I hope that comes about, because I do have concerns about traffic in this neighborhood. I have concerns about parking in this neighborhood. And I'm also concerned about amenities, like as Councillor Zerillo has raised. That this is a neighborhood that's calling out for amenities. And when I get an email from a resident, or I guess it was a letter that we received, and they talk about how the kids play on the street down here at the end of the street, and how the extra traffic is going to mean that their kids aren't going to be able to play out in the street. And I thought how sad that is, that we view the loss of pavement as being loss of a community amenity. And I think that speaks to the fact that we need to provide amenities into this community quickly, so that kids do have parks and places to play, and that they're not relying on quiet streets as where they play. I think at the same time we also have to recognize that there is going to be an impact in this neighborhood, and that we have to work to try to lessen that impact on streets that have traditionally been quiet and been quiet dead-end streets, and to make sure that their street just doesn't become a parking lot for development, not just this development, but all the development that's taking place in the Burquitlam area. So I'm anxious to see some development come forward, how we're going to deal with parking. I think we're going to need a parking management plan quickly in this area. There's a lot of anxiety about extra people moving in, creating extra traffic, creating extra parking, and we're supposed to be trying to reduce our dependency on cars, not figuring out where we're going to put more cars. And I think that's the part that I think that's missing in this whole plan. I know it's going to partly be addressed when we do the Burquitlam plan, but in the absence of that plan, I think there's a lot of anxiety about where we're going to put cars, where we're going to park. And I think that's the part that's missing here. So I'm supporting this on faith that we are going to come up with that we're going to start getting those amenities into this neighborhood, because they need them now. And hopefully some of this is going to all be addressed when all of the rest of the pieces of the puzzle are on the table here. Thank you.
Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I like this plan. I think we have to recognize that our neighborhoods are absolutely changing. I want to echo the comments from a number of the other speakers. Parking's a concern, but I think what we've got here is an opportunity that the TDS document itself is really carrying a lot of weight with me. So congratulations for the work on that previously to help guide us through this. What I've heard is that there's the uncertainty with the change, and that makes people uncomfortable. And so if I could ask of staff to identify some manners in which we can enhance the communications of the TDS into these areas that are going to be impacted. I think, and let people know pieces such as the street lengths and some specifics around there, I think, to really open the eyes of the residents to say, this is what's coming, and these are the good possible outcomes we're going to see. I'm impressed with what Polygon's presented to us. We're looking at density without going to the maximum. Without coming back and saying we want a narrow footprint 8 stories high, to come up with something 5 stories with a setback, and coming up with a site coverage that looks very positive and very creative with the parking suggestions. So I'd support this good looking project.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
I really like this development as well. I drove through the neighborhood a couple times over the weekend to really get a feel for it, and I actually lived in that neighborhood about late 80s, early 90s while I was going to SFU, and it was a really good neighborhood back then. It was close to the mall, it was close to down the hill to Port Moody, the grocery store, getting to SFU. Even now it's even a better neighborhood with the SkyTrain and the new BOSA development and the malls expanded and all that. So going with the housing options, I think it's a really good development for people to get into the market. For example, when I was finished SFU and I wanted to get in the market, there wasn't really anything I bought in Burnaby. So I'm back in Coquitlam now, but so I think it's a fantastic location for that housing options. And also, somebody else from the audience today spoke about the whole downsizing. I actually had 2 older relatives that lived on Ebert. And unfortunately, when their partners passed away and now they're at the Robinson Cemetery, they wanted to downsize so they could stay in that neighborhood and visit the cemetery easily and all that. And there wasn't really anything. So I'm thinking that this development will also appeal to not only the younger people trying to get into the market, but for the other end, because it looks like a really nice development. So I'm impressed with it. I'm impressed with Polygon, and I also learned tonight that they have a policy to fit the suites for people with special needs, and I think that's fantastic. I don't think everybody buying in there will necessarily need a car, so the 1.47 cars per unit, I think that's a great initiative, and Chris already brought that up, but some of the suites are only 470 square feet. So I'm thinking that the person who lives there is probably just a single person and they only have one car. So that might end up providing a lot more parking than we think. Overall, I don't think this is going to be a negative impact on the neighborhood. I think it will revitalize it. It fits in with the transit-oriented strategies and provides the housing options. So I'll be voting for it.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, just to go over some of the things that other people have said and to agree with them. A, the transit-oriented development strategy did foresee us taking actions just like this, and so I'm glad we have that in place. This is where the rubber meets the road on that strategy, and we're actually seeing the impact of that, and it is guiding us. And I take that as we were part of that decision-making process, the earlier iteration of council. Something has been mentioned, and I really want to underline it, is while we still don't have an approved affordable housing strategy, and the scope of that strategy is still going to be discussed in the coming months or even years, we can do positive things right now to support affordable housing. And one of the things that I've been very consistent on in my time on council is to talk about the value of structures like this to help people. This is a concrete, well, it's wood. It's a concrete manifestation of affordable housing, even though it's made of wood. And as the applicant said, if going by previous experience, up to 20% or even more of the units that will be bought will be put on the rental market. And I would hope that there would be some sort of covenant in place from the builder that says that when the strata people take over, that they can't all of a sudden shut that down and say no rental. So look forward to the applicant saying no, this is going into it. You can't ban rental in something like this. I also wanted to touch on something that was actually a few weeks ago a big point of discussion around this building, the fact that it is a 5-story wood frame residential structure. Attachment 3 to item 5 to the public hearing brief points out is an information bulletin talking about 5- and 6-story wood frame residential structures. And this bulletin, I think, is a very important step forward for the city, which will answer a lot of concerns that the public had, our firefighters have. And this bulletin was prepared by the Fire and Rescue Service and by Planning and Development departments in the city, which talks especially about the special hazards that wood frame buildings pose in the construction phase, and that what we can do about that, taking some very solid steps. I think, to deal with this issue. It's not the problem that these buildings are very, very safe once they're built and people are moved in, the sprinkler systems and everything in place and all the firewalls. But it's the fact that when they are being built and before the sprinkler systems are in and fire guards are in, that's the point, especially in a neighborhood where there's lots of surrounding homes, that we want to be very careful and take all the steps we can to make sure that the safety is number one. And so I'm really pleased with this information bulletin going forward. And if members of the public were wondering whatever became of that discussion we had a couple of weeks ago, this is the result of it. And and I know there would have been some concern with some members of council, some of my colleagues, about going forward with a 5- and 6-story wood frame buildings, and this is just a 5-story one, without something like this in place. So this gives us another measure of security that I'm pleased to see in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I will be supporting this. I gave this a lot of thought. The Pollock Polygon is a great builder. They've got a great reputation. They stand behind their work. It is offering larger suites, which I think is really important because we have a lot of folks that want to downsize, but they don't want to downsize into 600 square feet. Believe me, I've just done it, and it's not easy. I found I had 3 of everything that I don't need. I think the important thing, Councillor O'Neill brought it up, was the construction phase and the new fire codes and bylaws, and we had, I would say, an excellent presentation from our fire chief and an excellent explanation of what takes place during the construction phase. I also want to make sure that we have a contract for behavior on this one as well. When we talk about construction behavior, about the trades and folks coming and going, the language that's used, the way they're going to park, and I'd like to make sure that our neighbors are treated with respect, and if not, just shut it down. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the TDS. We brought the TDS in because Burquitlam became quickly the hub of everywhere, and we needed something to guide us. And we are going through and doing more with the OCP. There is an OCP in place. There's a TDS in place, which just snakes along where the evergreen line is. One of the reasons I'm supporting this is because, one, Burquitlam Community Association has given it their seal of approval, and two, it's within the 400 meters. And had it been outside the 400 meters, I would have had second thoughts at this point in time because of the process that we're going through. But because we're in the 400 meters, that's what we have to do. And we have to do it now. And we have to take advantage of good builders, good developers, and good projects. And I think that this is one. And I just wanted to note on Vanessa Court, for those of you who live there, I sold houses on there many years ago. And Vanessa Court, I remember when they put it in and the developer came along and he says, well, I own a couple of lots in here, and if we could just get a road, well, there's nowhere for it to go. Well, it doesn't matter. We'll just put it in and keyhole it at the end, which was the word in those days. Keyhole it at the end and we'll develop it. And all the neighbors around came out and protested, and they didn't want this little cul-de-sac in. So it doesn't matter what century you're in, what year you're in, everything that's new, it just becomes old, and there's something new again, and change is hard. Change is really difficult. But hopefully this one is for the best. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this one as well. I walked the neighborhood this morning. It's challenged in some ways. It's a very nice little street in other ways, Vanessa Court. And my daughter Vanessa thinks it was named after her, because that's what I told her. I told her that. We are going through Burquitlam now, and we're increasing the parkland, we're increasing the amenities. That was something that didn't happen 30 years ago. We need that to happen. We need those improvements to take place in a community that doesn't have enough parkland. It doesn't have the dog off leash parks. It doesn't have the parkland that we need for the rest of the folks either. And this is within a 5-minute walk of SkyTrain, so it's going to be there's going to be density there. We end up having to put some density there. So mind you, so is Vanessa Court. Vanessa Court is within the 5-minute walk or 6-minute walk of the SkyTrain station. So we're going to see transformation in those neighborhoods. One of the advantages in this case is it's an extremely responsible developer. We've had some issues related to the neighborliness of construction, related to the way in which development has taken place in some streets of Burquitlam and by some development companies. I have no qualms whatsoever about this one. I think this one will do, as it always seems to do, an incredible job without those kinds of concerns. I've spent some time driving the streets of Burquitlam in the last couple of months and seeing that we have some work to do with some of the others, and we're going to have to stay on top of them. This one isn't going to be that kind of an issue. As far as the north-south connections, we have to find those solutions, because in the absence of north-south connections or east-west connections in some circumstances, in the absence of those mid-block connections, people race down the block to go essentially, 400 meters. They're going to go half a kilometer down, but they're going to go at high speed, and they're going to we end up with complaints about all kinds of additional traffic movements, extra time spent on the roads and extra distance traveled because of the road network. And we should be trying to create a road network that is gridded properly so that we can minimize to some degree the amount of travel that's necessary. I think it's a great development. I think it's a great design, and I think it will do some really good stuff for the neighborhood. And that's it. The motion is an OCP amendment and second, third, and fourth reading on that, and second, third on zoning. All in favor? Opposed? The motion, nope. Councillor Zarrillo is opposed. The motion carries.
The second recommendation is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4518. There's
second and third on all in favor. Opposed? Councillor Zarrillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Sorry, there's different voting thresholds for the two.
Yep.
So. Item 9 is fourth and final readings of 2015 water, sewerage, and drainage and solid waste rate amending bylaws. Recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading to the water distribution amending bylaw, the sewerage and drainage system amending bylaw, and the solid waste management amending bylaw.
Okay, we'll do, that's fine. You want 1, 2, and 3 separate? Okay. Okay, on 1. They're all moved already. Was moved and seconded, were they? No, they weren't. Okay, so, fine. Councillor Reid moves, seconded by Councillor Marsden, Councillor O'Neill.
Okay. So, thank you very much. I wanted to speak specifically to number 1 here. I've had concerns from the outset over the water rates that were the new tiered water rates for single-family homes versus those for condominiums and townhouses and things like that. I don't think the process that led staff to recommend it was the right one. There was no public input on this, but I know we have to have we've got to have a water fee of some sort here. So, what I want to ask for here, because I think the most egregious injustice that might come out of this is looking at the single-family homeowner who maybe they've lived in a smaller home for a long period of time. We've been talking about all the changes in Burquitlam. Maybe they've got an older home there. Their kids have moved out. I know in southwest Coquitlam, a lot of the doors that I knocked on were answered by people in their late 60s or 70s who are staying in their homes, who probably aren't using an awful lot more water or any more water at all than the people who are living in condominiums or townhomes. They certainly don't have a lot of people living in those homes. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of thing that we can look into, maybe in the coming year, that if we do approve this, maybe next year that we could have staff look into refining the rates that would allow people in older homes with no more than 2 people living in the home, smaller homes, maybe it's less than 2,800 square feet, or maybe it's 3,200 square feet or something like that, to take advantage of a rate that's in the middle, a rate that would be the rate that we would be going to if we hadn't adopted this new split rate. Is it possible that staff could look into the possibility of having some sort of letter that people can declare that, yes, there's only 2 people here, and that also look into the possibility of having a third rate for these sorts of people? Third sort of level rate in between the 2 rates?
Yeah, we certainly could look into the possibilities in that regard and report back during this coming year and have some council discussion on that prior to the second installment. Because we do have we're on a 5-year phase in, so this first phase is just very small. And during this year, we can look at some refinements and give council some options in that regard.
Do we need a motion for that, or is that just?
No, I think the staff have taken direction on that one. I think there's previous discussion as well. It probably wouldn't be at 3,200 square feet, which is among the largest houses in Coquitlam. It would probably be a threshold somewhere around 1,200 or 1,500.
Okay,
but anyway,
maybe.
But staff will come back with some suggestion as to how to do that. Notwithstanding that those are also the homes that will probably need their service replaced soon, and that's among the maintenance aspects that we're having to cover the costs of now, because the homes are 40 years old and the services last about 40 years.
So I am specifically looking at the people who are already, let's say in their southwest Coquitlam, where land prices are rising disproportionately higher because of the pressures of development in nearby neighborhoods, and we're seeing homes there. So these people are looking at increased property taxes relative to people who live in areas like where I live in Eagle Ridge, where it's been pretty flat. We're not close to any redevelopment. But if I had the same sort of home in Burquitlam, that property values would be going through the roof, and my property taxes would be going really high. And now we want to look at, with this regime, having hitting them with higher water bill too, and this is what I don't want. So I want to give them some relief somewhere.
So it's specific to areas that have higher.
Well, no, it's not. It's just that's one of the possibilities. That's one type of person who is adversely affected by this, and that would have been, yeah. Okay. So anyway,
okay.
So thank you for that,
Councillor Hodge.
I've raised similar concerns all along on this one, and including when staff first brought this proposal to us to do this split, because it's based on some assumptions. It's based on averages, and I think there's models that prove that there's some merit in what staff brought forward. But at the same time, I recognize, as Councillor O'Neill has said, there are people, and sometimes single people now, that the family has grown up, has left the house, and they're still in the family home, possibly one of the older, smaller homes. They're not using the amount of water that they once used. They may be using less water than a family of 3 or 4 living in a multifamily. And so I completely understand the concerns that they have. I think that when we talk about water, we have to now split into 2 different topics, the cost of providing the infrastructure and the cost of the water itself. And so I do recognize that there's a bit of an increase in the cost of the infrastructure, because 100 homes are going to take up more space on the street and use more pipe than 100 homes in an apartment. So I understand where the concept originated. I wish we'd had more time to discuss it and have a little more public input into it and explain to the public a little bit more why this change is going forward. However, I also think that there are a number of people, residents, who are living in those homes that they've paid taxes on for 40, 50 years, and they don't draw a distinction between the property tax they've paid and the cost of infrastructure. I think a lot of people sort of feel that the tax money that they're paying on their home each year, that's going into roads and pipes and all those services. And they see I think they see the utility bills as a commodity fee. And it's not. It actually incorporates some of that infrastructure. But to the people who've paid those taxes and living in a family home or single family home, they've paid more taxes, and so they, I think, are the ones that are going to be hit the hardest by this change. And I think that if we continue this over a 4-year period, that gap is going to become a lot wider. And I think that we have to take a step back now and have a look at where we're going down the road with this. How far do we want to widen that gap? And is there an opportunity to offer relief to people who are in older homes that the family has downsized, but they're still trying to stay in the home that they've lived in for the last 40 years? And I think that's one of the things that we have to look at. And so I'm happy that staff is going to look at this and I hope that they bring it back in the fall where we have a little more time, or even earlier, so we have some time to really discuss this before we take the next step with this. So I feel better about that, knowing that we're going to do that.
We've already agreed that we're going to do that. Okay, Councillor Zarrillo.
Clarification on what we're voting on here, just on number 1. Could I just get some clarification exactly what we're voting on? Because I know there's two separate issues right here. There was the vote about changing the mix to 40/60, and then there's the rates, the water rates. So what are we exactly voting on for this?
We are voting on the water rates for next year, which incorporates a phased shift over 5 years for the new water rates. So it's ultimately it's about an 8% differential, because it's only a fifth of the ultimate. And but the rates, this bylaw includes all the rates for all aspects for the coming year, which includes just that incremental shift at the start of it.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I just wanted to make sure that the shift has already been done, right? Because I strongly agree in the democratic process, and if this council's will was the shift, then the shift is done, and that's not on the table.
This includes the shift. What was talked about here is that during this coming year, and we'll endeavor to do this before the summer break, so there's plenty of time to discuss, is to discuss some nuances as the two other councillors have highlighted.
Okay. So I appreciate that, and I'll look forward to seeing that come forward, because I think I was surprised to see the percentage changes in the rise and the fall. So I would like to see the opportunity for more discussion, but I just wanted to clarify what we were actually voting on, and I'll be fine to support this, because I've already accepted the fact that we are doing the shift.
Okay, so this is simply the water distribution amending bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Passes unanimously. The second one is the sewerage and drainage amending bylaw. Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Actually, you can name the bylaw.
You were on a roll. That's good.
Solid waste and management amending bylaw is moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Did you want to continue, or?
Yeah, might as well. I'm getting tired. Ms. Laura, go ahead.
Item 10 is fourth and final reading of 2015 fees and charges bylaw. The recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading to the bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is a development permit authorization for a commercial building at 1301 Lougheed Highway. The recommendation is that council approve the signing and sealing of the development permit, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute the permit on behalf of the city.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. It did come in stereo, I'll tell you that.
Item 12 is a development permit authorization for two apartment buildings, Parker House West and Parker House East at 1152 Windsor Mews. The recommendation is that council approve signing and sealing of the development permit, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute the permit on behalf of the city.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Good night. Carried unanimously. That's it. Ms. Lohr.
Item 13 are the Spirit Grant requests for the fall 2014. The recommendation is that council approve the recommended disbursements of the Spirit of Coquitlam Grant Program, totaling $266,238 as outlined in the report. approve the proposed amendments to the Spirit Grant eligibility and disbursement guidelines intended to emphasize projects that support activities related to the 2016 125th anniversary celebrations, BC 55 Plus Games, and Celebrate Coquitlam. And 3, approve the recommended funding in the amount of $10,000 to support local neighborhood events in 2015.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Marsden. I'm a bit disappointed. We used to have all of the community groups stay here for that point of the meeting, but they didn't stay. All in favor? Opposed? They even had to return the lights on in the lobby. Carried unanimously.
Item 14 is the Mundy Park Fieldhouse replacement. And we do have a introductory comments by the Acting General Manager, Parks, Recreation and Culture, and General Manager, Strategic Initiatives.
Your Worship, I don't have to have any comments, whatever Council wishes. It's up to the wishes of Council. I was going to make some comments. I was also going to have some comments from the General Manager of Strategic Initiatives, but it's up to Council's wishes. Thank you.
Councillor Reid has moved, seconded by everybody else. Councillor Towner. Councillor Towner here. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? You are convincing, Mr. Alueva. A compelling argument made. Thank you very much. Yeah. And Mr. Sinisha, I tell you, I've never heard you more compelling. I never heard you.
Item 15, Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project Information Request Number 2. Recommendations that Council approve the issues outlined in the report.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Reid. Councillor Zarrillo.
So I had a couple of questions about this, and my apologies because it's now 12:32. Right. Impact of the change of ownership or the structure of the Kinder Morgan, is that matter to us? What is the fallout from that right now? They're trying to say that this application is no longer legal. Like, is any of this matter to us as a city?
Through your worship, I'm not aware of that this is a material change.
Okay. There is a note on page 2 that it substantially reduces the impact to Colony Farm. It doesn't say that it does not impact Colony Farm. Have we heard any more from that?
No, at this point it's a little bit too early to say what the exact impact is going to be, because they need to proceed and finish the final design. But as I understand, they plan to lease for the period of the construction spur line from the rail company, and with that they can avoid much of the impact on the farm itself. But again, we will not know the exact impact until the final design is not completed.
Okay, so they haven't got a final plan yet?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. Financial implications, page 3. Are we partnering with any other municipalities as far as sharing information or not?
Yes, we are, but we are in the middle of that process. But yes, we have partners. We work together.
Okay, that's great. I have some other thing. For page, my eyes are getting as bad as the mayor's here. Attachment A. Well, the one about commercial impacts during construction. I don't have a page number here, but I'm looking at page 3 under request. What are the probable construction methods and practices along United Boulevard? I just wanted to share about the preferred right-of-way at ICBC rather than going along Schooner. Is that also feedback that you received from businesses along there?
We did not go out to solicit feedback from the business owners, but we identified this as an issue for the city of Coquitlam.
Yes.
We submitted this issue during our first request for information, and we are continuing to follow up on that. So we don't have more information at this point. We will be getting more information from Kinder Morgan. And at one point, Kinder Morgan will have to also listen to the business owners' concerns.
But is it the city's preference, too, to use the right-of-way at the ICBC piece there, Hartley, through the ICBC right-of-way rather than going up Schooner? Is that also our
I believe that's our preference.
our preference? Okay. I think that might be it. On page 7 about the potential impacts on current and future municipal operations, I had the note about flood control enhancements. I think Councillor Reid had talked in the past about our flood control stuff. Like, are we concerned, or is this going to go into our flood control plans, or is there going to be additional cost to the municipality's flood control plan?
Well, I think the intent of this particular request for information is to identify and fully understand the ongoing impacts of such pipeline in our city. And just to give you an idea, these impacts could be costly when it comes to relocating existing utilities, replacing existing utilities which are owned and operated by the city of Coquitlam. So we are in the process of trying to identify all of these concerns and quantify them. As to the flood protection, off the top of my head, I don't believe that this is a project that would substantially contribute to concerns about flooding, but should this project proceed, certainly we can make a requirement to Kinder Morgan to deal with it.
Thank you, Joseph. That's the only other thing. The only other thing I had circled was the one about the methane. The methane, that was news to me. So thank you for the report.
Okay. The motion is approve the issues. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
We do have two on-table items. The first is council member appointments to 2015 advisory committees, statutory committees, and other bodies. And the recommendation is that council approve the appended list to the report of the city clerk.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
And item 17 is citizen appointments to statutory committees and boards.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, with our thanks to Alice Hale, Kelly Zimmer, Nick Dominelli, Suzanne Kennedy, and Dave Whalen. Appreciate it very much. Thank you in advance for your service. Moved by Councillor O'Neill to adjourn, seconded by Councillor Towner. Before we do that, I want to acknowledge Ugly Sweater time. It's the time to be ugly and grant wishes, and so I am doing my best to do the first part of it anyway. Got my sweater. I know you like this sweater, but yeah, it's got little elephants on it and everything. So, stop. The motion is to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll now open the floor to any questions from the audience on tonight's agenda. Any question at all? Staff don't count. No. Any questions at all? Thank you all for coming.